and well-versed understand how to give that to them. So if their goals are fat loss, improved body composition, improved quality of life, enhanced athletic performance, how are we going to get those? By getting stronger. So now we're getting into the anaerobic exercise portion of this. What is anaerobic exercise? Simply put, it's strength training, right? Anaerobic means without oxygen, so it is any energy system that does not require the oxidation of fat. It's any exercise typically under 2 minutes. It's all activity at the first onset, and it's at typically a higher intensity. Anaerobic training is high intensity training utilizing either the ATP, PCR, or anaerobic glycolysis energy systems, non-oxidative. That is the actual scientific definition, and we should do our best to understand, to know and understand that. Not recite, but to know and understand. Muscular strength, muscular power, and muscular endurance lasting under 2 minutes all fall under anaerobic exercise, and they all build strength. Principles of training. This was one of my favorite memes, and I've been using it for several years. If you've seen the movie, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, you should understand the reference. But one of the principles of training, the reversibility, is if it's true that if you don't use it, you lose it. We have 5 other principles. Specificity, and that's using the SAID principle, the specific adaptations to an imposed demand. So if you want a specific outcome, your training should match that as close as possible. There is a point of diminished returns with specificity, of course, and we have seen some of those on the popular fail videos on Instagram of people doing what is seemingly ridiculous exercises in hopes to imposing a demand, or excuse me, in hopes to occurring a specific adaptation. Overload, exercises need to progressively get harder to stress the body, because we have the law of accommodation and the principle of adaptation. So if our baseline homeostasis is here, we have a little bit of a stress, we go into an alarm phase, then we get back up and we're a little bit higher, that's compensation. So our stress must continuously improve or increase so that our physiology can. Now, once we get to a point where our homeostasis or our baseline increases, if the training stimulus does not increase, then we're going to plateau or accommodate, and we never want to accommodate. You've been used in an analogy of Milo carrying the young calf to market every single day, and as the calf grew into a larger and larger and eventually full-sized bull, he was still carrying it because his training stress increased ever so slightly over the long term. Individual differences. So this is the principle of individuality. This is the reason that we can't all go online, download Thor's power programming for deadlifting and become the world's strongest man, because that program was developed specifically for his individuality and his response to training, as well as his nutrient intake. So for us, we are all very different. There is a level of individuality. We have a different genetic baseline and genetic ceiling. We have and different responses to stressors. You may find that specific people will respond better to the 5 to 8 rep range or the 3 to 5 rep range after working with them for a long period of time. You'll also see who can kind of strain a little bit harder and who doesn't really have that neurological intent to move mountains when they're going up for an attempt. So all of those little nuances or individualities that that you should certainly start to know for yourself, but through diligent record keeping, as well as clients once you start taking them. Recovery is where the real magic happens. That's our rest and nutrition. That is where we actually do the building. So obviously exercise in and of itself is catabolic, and we go back to that response phase. So we have the alarm, and we have the stress, then we go into the alarm phase, and then we build back up to a little bit higher. That's compensation. That all happens during recovery and nutrition. So if we do not adequately recover from our training, and we do not through food and sleep, then we won't be able to train as frequently or as hard, and our volume over time will continue to decrease when it should be increasing. And finally, as we said earlier, reversibility. If you don't use it, you lose it. All right, everyone needs strength, so we should all be squatting and deadlifting and doing the big barbell exercises, but we should also do plenty of accessory exercises and, again, recover properly. Talk about metabolic rate and energy a little bit. So this is a pretty cool diagram discussing how metabolism actually works. And one common flaw with our thinking as a broader society is we think that if we go to the gym every single day, then we can eat this amount of calories, or we can have this food item, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, what really helps when it comes to nutrition is calories in, calories out, and building that big metabolic engine. I commonly refer to this as, or use an analogy of cars. If you're into vehicles, if I pull a 4-cylinder engine out of a Honda Civic and put an 8-cylinder engine in, it's going to burn more fuel just at idle. Our bodies are no different, but except for our engine is our muscles and our heart. So if we build bigger muscles, then our heart has to idle at a bigger BPM or do more work to maintain that muscle, and that's all going to burn more calories. So your resting metabolic rate increases through increased muscle mass. So our exercise is only a very small fraction of what we burn throughout the day. We also have neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's all activity outside of exercise, just walking around, moving, scratching, itching, going to the bathroom, anything outside of actual planned structured exercise. Then you have the thermic effect of meals. We'll talk a little bit about how proteins have a higher thermogenic effect than other foods, and that's why it's hard to store excess calories of protein as body fat. Whether that's true or not, still debated, but that's the thermogenic of food itself does contribute to caloric burn. And then finally, the biggest one, which looks to be over 50%, closer to 60%, is resting metabolic rate. And we talked about that. Swap that 4-cylinder with a V8, and we'll burn more of that just being us, which is great. So why does anaerobic training improve our body composition? It's very simple. 60 to 70% of all calories are burned coming from your resting metabolic rate, or your RMR, or finally your basal metabolism. And that is just the amount of calories it takes to keep you alive at rest in a fully climate controlled room doing nothing. So that's just maintenance. That's your RMR. And then it goes into bigger definition downstairs. And right here you have the magic word homeostasis, which just means, again, just baseline level of not doing anything. Why does anaerobic training improve body composition? And aerobic training does not. It doesn't increase your metabolic rate. So doing long duration, or what's the word for it? LSD, long, slow duration runs and bikes and 50 minutes on a Stairmaster, those things, they're not anaerobic, they are aerobic. So they are oxidizing fat as fuel, and that's fine. You may have a big caloric burn in that hour or that 50 minutes on the Stairmaster, but you have done nothing to increase the muscles, which will increase your RMR, and that's where 60 to 70% of your calories are burned. So that's kind of the difference there. Every pound of muscle requires additional calories each day to simply maintain that muscle mass. And how do we increase our muscle mass? You guessed it, anaerobic exercise. Why does anaerobic training improve body composition? Continue. Therefore, to maximize the amount of calories burned each day, it is crucial to build and maintain muscle mass through anaerobic training. We covered that a little bit earlier. The more lean muscle we have, the more calories burned per day. So that's that V8 for 4-cylinder swap. The most common response from briefing people or questioning people on this topic: aerobic training burns more calories per training session than anaerobic training, right? Even if it were to do it, it is still not increasing the muscle mass that burns calories 60 to 70% more than your single window of time of exercising. So understanding why that is not a helpful line of thought is extremely important. I work with clients all day, every day, and this is a conversation that I've had with most of them. Anaerobic training increases your metabolic rate, which increases total calories burned throughout the day. Most calories are burned at rest through your RMR. A couple of studies linked here to help break down that topic a little bit more. A little cross comparison of marathon runners versus sprinters. You can see the muscular development. You can see the muscular development on both. Obviously, you see the lean muscle mass, but one builds and maintains more lean muscle versus the other one that is a little bit more catabolic. So the two pictures in the middle are of anaerobic athletes, and the two pictures on the far left and right side are aerobic athletes. And you can see the difference in their physicality. Obviously, there's other differences too. It would be not wise to mention that, the principle of individuality, but you can see the difference for yourself. There is a strong relationship between muscular strength and speed and power. Most athletic events require high levels of speed and power. There is a little bit of a disagreement on whether all athletes should be pushed to get stronger. There's a lot of coaches coming up now and saying that there is a point of diminished returns. If you take a 500-pound squatter to a 600-pound squatter, they may not necessarily get faster. Versus you take on a newer or a beginning athlete and increase their strength, then they'll get faster. Both are true, but if you take two athletes of the same build and the same muscle mass and the same amount of training, so literally you take a clone, one gets stronger without increasing the mass, the stronger one will probably be the more athletic one. So I have a saying personally that strength is never a weakness in that scenario. But you can get to a point where you put too much focus after a while, after you become an elite weightlifter, it becomes too much of a commitment and recoverability issue to maintain the accumulation of tonnage that you need to maintain that level of strength. That is when it becomes diminished. Anaerobic training has been proven to have ergogenic effects for endurance athletes, which just means good effects. So even endurance or aerobic athletes can improve from anaerobic training. I have a list of references here for the research that was stated. And we're going into our lab activity. So this was for the before time when we were not in an electrical, digital, virtual classroom in the pandemic. But this is what the lab activity will be. Obviously, it'll be modified and thrown more into forms of discussions on Canvas. So those will be posted up, and just be sure to follow them. Next, we're going to go into our warm-up.